Hello my dears, welcome to another tier ranking video. So glad to have you. I am fully sick right now and I figured there's no better time to do an unscripted video than a time when I don't have a single brain cell functioning. So I decided today was the day to make my tier ranking video because we just hit 100 reviews for disability, which is so exciting, and so many also, but also my media request form has like over 1,000 things on it, so I'll be doing this forever, I guess. Anyway, we're gonna go over what the categories are and then we're gonna rank them, and it's gonna be such a fantastic, wonderful time. If you're new to my tier ranking situation for some reason, I have a review series that is shorts, that's on here. It's also on Instagram, it's also on TikTok, where I do 2 a week. That will become less starting in the new year because I am way too busy for my own good. But right now it's 2 a week. It's a really great time. I really enjoy doing it. I have an autism series and I have a disability series. I used to have a memory loss series, but I don't really like reviewing memory loss representation. And it's also very hard to track down, so that has been subsumed under the disability category. And it's great also if you don't want to watch it on those platforms but you still want to know what they are, or if you need to like cite them for something and you want to know what the specific language is. I do have them all typed up in a giant document that is linked on my website under the review section if you need it. I also have a section on my website that has my personal recommendations for what you should watch, read, etc. by category, which is really fun as well, and I always update that. So that all those options are available. I will link everything below if you want it. But today we're going to tier rank the last 50 things that I reviewed. It's going to be a really fantastic time. Also for friends who need it, I'm a white young person with light brown just beyond shoulder length curly hair, and I'm wearing a navy blue button up, and I'm sitting in front of a plain wall that's about to become my really badly edited not so green screen, and it's just gonna work because it's semi-worked all the other times, and again I'm too lazy to go out and purchase a green screen and have to deal with that. So this is the situation that we get. I think it's fun. I think it has just enough of the janky vibe that is necessary for an unscripted chaos tier ranking video, in my opinion. Anyway, let us go over the categories. First I need to figure out how to screen record because I forget every single time I do this. Alright, so our categories are... The first category is Go Now. This is something that I think about regularly after having reviewed it, and it means a lot to me, or I really liked it, or it just like sat in my brain. And you should go check it out immediately. That's really the only category here that actually matters because that's my primary recommendations for you. Great. Next one down after that is No Notes. This is something that is perfection. She is the moment. She's beautiful. She's not, you know, perfect enough that I'm like thinking about it all the time, or it's good. I don't have a lot of things to say negatively about it, but it's not my favorite. One of those kinds of things. Below that we have No Notes Kids Edition. This is the same situation, but it's for media for children because media for children is usually great, and so it deserves its own category. Next we have Buttered Noodles. Buttered Noodles is something that it's a comfort food. It's a good time. Does it have a lot of protein? Does it have a lot of nutritional value? No, it doesn't. But it doesn't need that. That's okay. It can be what it is, and that's totally fine. So it's like a guilty pleasure kind of situation. Or, you know, the representation was bad, but I really enjoyed the piece of media, or the other way around. Though this is the moment where I usually specify, I don't believe in bad representation. I believe in negative, harmful representation and everything else. So, everything that is actively harmful is what I'm going to be critiquing. Everything else I usually am cool with. It's just like a discussion. The idea of good versus bad is very subjective, and we shouldn't be acting like it is an objective measure, so I try not to do that. Sometimes I will say that language. I don't actually mean that language when I say it. Great. Next below that we have well, and that is in reference to what I say when people ask me how I feel about atypical. This is stuff that is aged terribly but is historically, culturally important. It's something that I am just like confused about. It's something I have questions about. It goes into that category. And then below that, of course, we have Borderline Hate Crime. That one should be self-explanatory. Amazing. We're actually going to be starting on review number 55 because if you remember, there was a nice strike that happened during my last group of reviews, so things are going to be a little bit out of order here, but that is okay because we don't need things to be in order. That's half the fun. Why do they upload out of order though? That's my question. Fantastic, amazing, wonderful. All right, we are going to begin with, of course, a couple Christmas movies because that's a great way to start. The first one is going to be A Christmas Prince. It's going to go into Buttered Noodles. The representation is fine. I mean, they could have cast a disabled person in the role. They should have cast a disabled person in the role. Also, the film, is it good? No. Is it a fun time, and I rewatch the entire series every single year before Christmas? Absolutely I do, because I love them. I love my Netflix Christmas rom-com trash. It's such a wonderful time of the year. We're getting almost to that time of the year, and I'm very excited about it. I'm doing all Christmas-related reviews for December again this year, so that's exciting. I'm probably not going to have any to do for the following year because I'm running out, but that's okay. I don't mind. Next, we have Christmas Ever After, and this was going to go into Buttered Noodles, but I'm actually going to put it into Well, and that is because it does have an actually disabled actress playing the disabled character, which I think is really cool, but then the movie itself isn't great, and also it sort of forgets that ableism exists in the world in which it takes place in a way that's sort of unsettling. Like, she's in the entire thing takes place in a building that is clearly not wheelchair accessible, and it's never addressed. She just appears upstairs a lot, and I was like, how did that? It's really strange, and it's just like, I guess it's sort of utopic that like ableism doesn't exist, but it's also just like off-putting and just feels wrong and weird, and I didn't love it. I think everybody did their best they could with the material that they had to work with, but the material just wasn't fantastic, and it had real disability, but it was not disability conscious, which I thought was quite odd. Next, we have A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol is going into borderline hate crime. I don't like this story. I never have liked this story. If you need three ghosts to tell you that you're being a piece of garbage, you have problems. But also because this is one of the most, Tiny Tim is one of the most famous disabled characters. Like, everybody names him as the disabled character. And he very much represents this like saintly, victim-y aspect of disability. And it just makes me uncomfortable that every Christmas season we constantly have this image of this like, you know, poor, unfortunate child in need of charity in a way that just feels really patronizing and gross and icky. And also, of course, the Christmas Carol script has the word cripple in it used at least 2 different times, and approximately no theaters ever take it out every year. So every single year, like most community theaters do A Christmas Carol, and this story just continues to be perpetuated in a way that just makes me uncomfortable and feel icky. That's why it's going into borderline hate crime, not because the actual media is bad for the time in which it was written, but because of how it is used today in a way that I don't like and I do not enjoy. Anyway, that's it for Christmas movies, apparently. Next, we have Mr. Holland's Opus. This is going into Well, and it's going into Well because the whole idea was that the father's everything that's important to Mr. Holland is music, and then he has a deaf child, and that just like, he's like, oh, now I can't connect with my kid, and everything's terrible, and I'm so sad that I have a deaf child, in a way that I didn't love. It also insinuated that like deaf people aren't living full lives because they can't understand music, which first of all isn't true, because deaf people very much can enjoy music in lots of different ways, and like it's not, there's lots of aspects to music other than just hearing it. Also, in addition to deaf people being able to enjoy music in whatever way is accessible to them, also you do not need to experience music to live a full life. And that's something that I felt like this movie wanted to be its message in a way that I don't think was very cool. I just didn't really like that narrative aspect of it. And I also think that the film itself kind of glorified Mr. Holland when they shouldn't have, because he was creepy and weird, and I didn't love that. Next, we have the Wonderstruck film. The Wonderstruck film is going to go into no notes. I do have a note, though, I will say, in all honesty. They had, oh my gosh, what's her name? Millicent Simmons? She was the deaf girl for like most of it, and she was fantastic and amazing. She's actually a deaf actress. But then for the older version of this deaf woman, they had a non-deaf person who didn't sign very confidently or fluently. And I was like, well, if you're signing this fluently as a child, why are you not doing that as an adult? Like, it just felt out of place for me. Otherwise, I love how this film played with deafness, and I also love this book. I love this author, frankly. Everything he does is fantastic. But that just wasn't my favorite. Anyway, otherwise, it's a really, really, really beautifully done film, and I really enjoyed it a lot, and you should check it out if you haven't already. Next, we have Coda. Coda's going into Go Now. Is it the most beautifully written script in the entire world? No. And guess what? That's okay, because we should be allowed to have cheesy movies that have a lot of disability in it. I think that's important and crucial and valuable, and I really enjoyed it, and I had a really good time. It's not how music school works. It's not how a lot of things work, but it was a cheesy good time, and so therefore I'm cool with it, you know? Next we have Purple Hearts. That one is going straight into borderline hate crime. This is the movie where a woman with diabetes can't afford her insulin, and so she marries a conservative military man so that she can get his benefits, and so he can get benefits, and he's using his benefits to pay off his debt from having done drugs. And then they kind of equate his drug use with her insulin use as being like the same thing, which no. Any message that's just like, yeah, of course, you know, anybody can, you know, love goes beyond politics is just complete BS, because actually if your politics don't want people like me to exist, then it doesn't go beyond that. Thank you. So yeah, it's an adventure of a film. I watched it on like 1.5 speed, I think, just to get through it. I had fun being angry at it, but that doesn't mean that it was a good movie. So it's going into borderline hate crime, because absolutely not. Next we have My Sister's Keeper, the film. The book ruined my life in the very best way. The film is going into buttered noodles. Overall, I felt that the story was less strong in the movie than it was in the book, and I will also add that the way that they portrayed the service dog in the book was like perfect, and it was gorgeous and very well done, and the way they portrayed the service dog in the film was not. And that was frustrating, because that's really one of the only times I've ever seen a service dog in media, and then they did it poorly, and I was like, hey, why are we doing that? So that's why I was going into buttered noodles. I prefer the book. I highly recommend the book, but it will ruin your life, so do with that what you will. I'll also take this moment to plug the fact that the author of My Sister's Keeper writes musicals along with some other really wonderful, amazing people, and their musical Between the Lines that was off Broadway 2 summers ago is now streaming on Broadway HD. They did a pro shot of it. It's really fun. It's a really good time. I highly recommend it, and you should go check it out. Might be a little bit biased, but you should definitely check it out. Next we have Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm assuming I mean Toph by this. This is going into No Nose Kids edition. It's really well done. It's really, really well done. I think that Toph is annoying, but she also has every right to be annoying, because she's kind of spoiled and traumatized and a lot of things. And it's just a really good show, and it's really well done. Obviously, I'm not referring to the live action. We're not even going to talk about the live action. That's a lie. We are going to talk about the live action, because apparently they cast a non-disabled person to play Toph. They said that they searched far and wide, but they couldn't find anybody who would be able to do it, which means that they didn't search far and wide, because there are literally so many blind and low vision actors, and I'm not impressed. So that's, you know, the worst. But also, I've heard that the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender isn't great anyway, so I guess it doesn't, I mean, it does matter, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, next we have Narrative Prosthesis. This is going to go into the Go Now category, and it's going to go into the, it's going to go into the Go Now category because when people ask me, like, what should I read to start to get into disability media analysis to learn about this kind of stuff, Narrative Prosthesis is always what I recommend as your go-to book. It's really the cornerstone of the field of disability media analysis. I have this little game anytime I research anything. If I can find one of 2 specific quotes from Narrative Prosthesis, and they're in every single thing that I read. It's used all the time. It comes up all the time. So you should read it. You should check it out. It's fairly short for an academic text as well. So I highly recommend taking some time to sit down and read it if disability media analysis is interesting to you and important to you. It's a very good read. And also, even if disability stuff isn't, it teaches you a lot about how to look at media from a minority lens more generally, and I still think that that is important. So, highly recommend it if you need an academic text to read or add to your curriculum if you're a teacher. This would be the one that I would recommend. Even, like, giving the introduction of it to your students would be super beneficial. So, yeah, definitely into the Go Now category. Go check it out. Next, we have the All the Light We Cannot See TV show. That is going to go into Well, and it's going to go into Well because while they did cast a blind actress and she did a fantastic job, they aged her up a ton, which they did not need to do and should not have done. I think that hurt the storytelling to some degree. There really wasn't a lot of understanding of the actual stakes at the time for disabled people in Nazi-occupied France, which I think was unfair. It was clear that the disability was put in more to make her seem like fragile and like in danger because she's offset by this deaf soldier, and I wish that they had played a little bit more with the fact that, like, you know, it wasn't just Jewish people and queer people who were taken off to those camps. There was a disability section of The Final Solution as well, and she was in great danger for being a part of that. And that just like isn't brought up in the book at all. Also, when it comes to the TV show, they were very heavy-handed with their messaging and being like, all of the evil people were like cartoonishly evil, and it just felt unreal from a historical perspective, and so it just wasn't my favorite. I didn't enjoy it very much. So I would recommend the book over the show if you're going to read it at all, but I also think that there's other Holocaust texts that tell stories like that a lot more strongly. The Book Thief would be my number one recommendation, even though the Book Thief doesn't really have explicit disability in it. I think it tells a lot of the narratives that All the Light We Cannot See was trying to tell in a better and more effective way. The thing about All the Light We Cannot See that really works is the descriptions of the nature and the beauty of what that city looked like, and then like what it looked like after it was bombed and all that kind of stuff, which I think is valuable but is not my personal taste. Anyway, that's beside the point. Next, we're going to talk about Echo. Echo's going straight into Go Now. I really enjoyed the show. It was really well done. From a deaf perspective, from a native perspective. Not that my opinions on whether it was done well from a native perspective actually matter, because they don't, but from a minority perspective, it was stunning. It was so beautifully well done. And Hawkeye's gonna come up later in this, but there was a big issue with Hawkeye where they had the ASL done really well, and then they didn't film it in a way that respected the entire sign space, so you couldn't actually see everything that they were signing, which is frustrating, and they fixed that when it came to making Echo, which I thought was really, really cool. And again, just seeing a deaf person with a prosthetic leading a show was just so empowering and so cool. And this was definitely on like the gorier and scarier side of what I prefer from my media, but it was worth it because, wow, it was just a really, really, really well done show. Next we have Everything Everything. We're going straight to the bottom of the list. It's going into borderline hate crime. First of all, any sort of Munchausen's by proxy trope in a show makes me want to scream. If you're not familiar with the issues with MBP, it is no longer, well, it never really was a diagnosis, but it is no longer a diagnosis. There's factitious by proxy, but that is a different situation. And overall, the more that we put in media, oh, like the mom is faking the daughter's disability to deal with her own trauma, the more people feel like there's a prevalence of disabled people faking disabilities, which is really not common, and the more people get denied medical care, and just particularly minority people, and it's a huge issue. I'll put my video about Munchausen by proxy above. You should check it out. It's a very fascinating history. So anyway, that made me very angry. Also, even if she did have whatever she thought she had, do not sacrifice your entire health for a boy. Don't do it. I don't care how cute they are. Or a girl, actually. I'm sorry, I need to be more inclusive of all genders and sexualities. I don't care how cute they are. You do not sacrifice your health for somebody else. You don't do it, you don't do it, and you don't do it. That is a firm boundary that you should set, because that's not cute, and staying alive is actually really important. I don't care how cute they are. Staying alive is important. So that's the parent Sydney lecture you're gonna get about this movie is, no, we shouldn't be, that's not beautiful, that's not romantic, don't do it. Anyway, next we have Six of Crows. Six of Crows is going into Go Now. Did this book kind of ruin my life because it had a lot of triggering content in it and it was really scary and I was scared? Yes. Did I really enjoy every single piece of it? Anyway, also yes. So much disability, so much like badass disability stuff. Such a fun book. I mean, it's not a fun book. It's a heavy book. I'm glad that I read it now, because I definitely would have picked this up in like middle school and would have been scarred for life, and that's fine. But it's a really good book, and you should check it out if that's your jam, because it's so well done. Next we have The Lion King. That's going into Buttered Noodles. Scar is a guy, and he's called Scar, which is a problem, and we're equating his physical disability to his villainy. I'm not going to put the movie below Buttered Noodles because it's a good movie and it's everybody's cornerstone of their childhood, but I am just going to point out that having a facial difference literally equate to somebody being evil is not cute, not the move, etc., etc. And yes, I did review this movie because I went to see the Broadway show and then remembered that the movie existed. It's fine. Okay, next we have El Defo, the show. It's going into No Notes Kids Edition. I personally did not like this show for myself, but that does not mean that it's not a good show. And what I mean by that is that the El Defo book I read when I was in high school, and when my auditory processing got a lot worse in high school. And it meant a lot to me because the way that she described her deafness, she accidentally also described auditory processing issues in a very clear, well done way. And so I was hoping that would carry over to the show. And the show made it more so that hearing kids could hear what it sounds like to have an auditory processing disorder, which is fine. Like, that's totally cool and very interesting from a editing perspective. But from me as somebody with auditory processing issues watching it, it became unwatchable for me, which made me sad. But that's okay because I'm not technically the primary target audience for that. I'm a accidental byproduct of the target audience for that. So that doesn't really matter. So it's really good, but I would just add that caveat. Next, we have The Blind Side. The Blind Side is going straight into borderline hate crime. It's going into borderline hate crime because they portrayed him as intellectually disabled when he's not. And they did that partially because he was under a conservatorship by the people who... This movie's just a white savior film. It's like, oh, we saved this poor black child, and then he became a professional football player. And they portrayed him as intellectually disabled, and it's very paternalistic and gross. And in real life, he thought he was being adopted by them, but he was actually being put under a conservatorship where they own his entire story. And it just, like, was a very icky situation. And I have a video about conservatorships that I will also link above that you should check out. But yeah, borderline hate crime, first of all, because of how this film itself exists as a white savior film, but second of all, because of what it was definitely used to defend, and the narrative that it was trying to make super public so that it's further justified their own behavior, which I think is gross and icky, and I don't love it. And that is a disability issue, even though he's not a disabled person. Conservatorships are a disability issue, so I put it into this series regardless. Next we have Luca. Luca's going into No Notes Kids Edition. It's going to go now. It's going to go now. I changed my mind. It's going to go now because they handled this disabled character really beautifully, and he didn't need to be there, but he was. And I think that's cool. I think that's important. I think that's valuable. And also this film just means a lot to me. I personally will say that I prefer Luca in Italian. I first watched it in Italian because it came out right before I studied abroad in Italy, and our Italian teacher told us to watch it, and we were like, okay, and we all sat down as a program like the first week we were there, and we all watched it in Italian. So it has a very special place in my heart. But I find that the overbearingness of the mother in particular works better in Italian and makes more sense in Italian than it does in the English version. So I do recommend watching it in Italian if you're ever bored, if you speak Italian, or if you don't, frankly, you just put the English subtitles on. It just, the vibes are different from the Italian version that I prefer. Anyway, okay, next we have The Greatest Showman, straight into borderline hate crime, babe. This one I feel like should be pretty self-explanatory as to why, but in case it's not, P.T. Barnum was a terrible person, and most of his freaks were enslaved people, and just the fact that the whole movie glorifies him is gross and disgusting. That being said, the music is beyond incredible, and Pasek and Paul could get away with murder if they haven't already, frankly. So I do like to watch it. I like to watch it every now and then, and I just skip most of the dialogue scenes and I just watch the songs because they're a really fun time. So if you want to do that, you're super welcome to, but it is an offensive movie that exists. But the performances are great, the music is great, it's just, why did we do that? Next we have Shape of Water, also going into borderline hate crime. I had a lot of issues with this movie that I'm not even going to get into. I will just link that review above because I'm very proud of that review and I'd rather not butcher it here. Just an offensive movie, and I did not enjoy having to watch it. Next we have Wish. Wish is going into Unwell. And it's going to Unwell because, yes, they had a disabled character in it that they handled quite well. They also had other clearly disabled characters in it that they then didn't act like were disabled in a way that was odd. And I also think that we're at a point, particularly with, major Disney movies where there could have been more depth in this character. There could have been more logic in this character. And I know that sounds a little hypocritical to say because I'm okay with how they handled it in Luca. But in Luca, they had such a strong story that they were telling more generally, that I understood why there wasn't space or room to delve into Dad being disabled, and him just being disabled is super cool. Meanwhile, in Wish, the story is just kind of all over the place. It's not very cohesive. The film itself just isn't very cohesive. It just feels like it feels like trope salad, really. They just kind of threw all their Disney things into one bowl and just hoped that it worked as a movie. And I just don't think it was very successful in that. So it becomes very painfully apparent that none of the characters have a lot of depth. And then the fact that the disabled character doesn't have a lot of depth is weird. And also, like, the rest of the characters around her, like, all of her friends were supposed to be reference to the Snow White, like to the Seven Dwarfs, sort of. And one of them was clearly a little person, and one of them probably was mentally disabled. Like, there was disability in there that was left ambiguous in a way that was weird. And overall, it's kind of unclear whether, like, if they wrote in that Dahlia wanted to have her disability fixed as her wish, you would believe that. Like, they never clarified that it was probably something else. And so for a non-disabled viewer who's not familiar with those politics, they might think that's what she's going to wish for. They do fix that in a short later, but it should have been in the movie. I think the movie itself wasn't brave about anything that it did and just kind of threw things in, was like, this is fine, right? And I think they could have done better than that. Next, we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown. This is going straight into Go Now. I love me a good romance novel. This one particularly, she has fibro and it impacts her life very much, impacts her relationship very much. And it was very healing and it was a very good time. And also I will happily promote anything by Talia Hibbert because she writes incredibly beautiful books and you should read all of them all the time. You're welcome. Next we have Avatar. This one's the one with blue people. That's going into borderline hate crime. They really just made a disabled character so that his motivation could be that he likes being in the Na'vi world because he's non-disabled there in a way that was not nice. And also the level of paternalism and racism and ickiness that was going on was not my favorite. And also, it's just not a very good film. I mean, when it comes to technology, it's fantastically done, but I didn't really enjoy the film. It's quite a slog. So that was a thing. For the highest grossing movie of all time, I really expected it to be better than it was. I'm a little disappointed if I'm honest with you. But yeah, I didn't like it, and I didn't like that they made a cast of the legs of a paraplegic person to put onto the non-disabled actor so that he would look authentically disabled when they didn't even need to. It was just, why? Anyway, moving on. Next is Rio. Rio's gonna go into No Notes Kids Edition. I really like this movie. It was really fun to rewatch as an adult. It's still pretty good. It still holds up. Yeah, I don't really have other notes than that. It's a fun time. The soundtrack also is so good, and I didn't realize how good it was, and then I was, like, in the first song, I was like, this is by John Powell, isn't it? And it is by John Powell, who wrote the How to Train Your Dragon music as well. He's very good at what he does. I enjoy him. Anyway, good movie, and was an absolute favorite as a little kid, and it brought me joy to still like it as an adult. Next we have Cinder. Cinder's going into No Notes. Such a good series. So much fun to reread it. I was just going to read the first one to review, and then I was like, wait, I want to know what happens. So I ended up reviewing the rest of the series, which is so much fun. They will all come up at some point during this. Yeah, it's such a good series, and it handles disability so well, and it didn't need to handle disability, but she chose to, and she did it fantastically, especially for the era in which this came out, which I'm just very impressed by, and definitely, the series definitely shaped how I viewed disability issues to some degree growing up, which I think is cool to see that I did have, like, you know, good role models, I guess. Because a lot of the things that I found from childhood, I'm like, oh, that's really bad. And it's cool to see that not all of it was really bad. Next we have Moana. This is going into No Notes Kids Edition. I very rarely review disability that is specifically elderly people because we tend to forget that elderly people are disabled people. I was like, there's disability in Moana? Where? Oh my gosh, Grandma Tolly uses a cane. I didn't even realize it, and was like, wow, I totally forgot about that somehow. So I thought it was important to include, and I'm going to try to include more of that and look for more of that because that is important. But yeah, I love Moana. I really love it a lot. Next we have Best Foot Forward. This is also going to No Notes Kids Edition. It feels like your average Disney Channel show. He just happens to have a prosthetic leg, and I think that's pretty sick and pretty cool. And it's very silly and well written, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I would also recommend checking this one out if you have Apple TV and you have kids, because it's cool for kids to see disabled kids in a live action show like that. A lot of disability that we have for kids is in animation, and I think it's cool to have it in a live action situation. Next is Hawkeye, which we talked about earlier. It's going into No Notes. Again, primarily my one note would be that the sign space was not filmed correctly, but they did fix it with Echo, which I really respect. I really enjoyed this series a lot. There's some superhero stuff that I watch that I'm just like, this is not well put together. Or like, it's very a stereotypically structured film or a stereotypically structured series in a way that's kind of boring, but this one I was like on the edge of my seat having a good time the entire time, and I really enjoyed it a lot. And in the exact opposite direction, next we have C, which is going to go into Well. This is a show that's on Apple TV, and it's about a world where everybody is blind, and they spent like millions of dollars teaching people how to pretend to be blind properly rather than casting blind and low vision people. Well, they did cast a handful, but none of them were the primary series regulars, which is weird and feels gross to me. And overall, just like, they were so focused on appearing visually like they understood what a blind society might look like without thinking about the actual anthropology of what that might look like. And I was like, well, why did you do that? What was the point of that? That was weird. You should have consulted blind people. Also, the show itself was just like, I don't know, it was a little too spooky for me personally. So yeah, not really impressed by this one, but that's okay. That's fine. Next we have The Politician. The Politician is going into Buttered Noodles. Again, this show also has a Munchausen by proxy subplot, which I don't like, but they also have an actually disabled actor playing actually disabled character, who did an incredible job because he always does an incredible job because he's him. But yeah, I enjoyed the show, frankly. It's Ryan Murphy chaos, and I'm not the hugest fan of Ryan Murphy. But I think it was interesting in that it like showed the absolute chaotic circus that is politics, and it looks chaotic because it's in a high school setting, but then you realize that so much of that is really what we do today, and it just made you kind of look at that differently. So I thought it was very well done, to some degree, but I still had issues with some semblance of it, so that's why it's just middle of the road. Next we have Joey Lucas from West Wing going straight into No Notes. She just shows up and starts yelling at people in sign language, and they're more shocked that Joey is a girl than they are by the fact that she's deaf, which I think is beautifully well done. Marlee Matlin kicks butt in everything that she does. We love Marlee Matlin. That's kind of all I have to say about that. Also, we're almost done. Next we have Hunchback. Hunchback's going into Buttered Noodles. It has its flaws and it has its positives, and it's complicated, and I have a really long video about it that I will link above for you because you should watch it, because I watched like 14 different versions of Hunchback and it was awful, so you should watch my video because you feel bad. Genuinely, I have very complicated feelings on Hunchback. I don't think that it should continue to exist at this point. Next we have Crest. This is from the Lunar Chronicle series along with Cinder. It is going up into No Notes because No Notes, it's so good. We love to see it. Crest is the third book. Scarlet didn't really introduce any new disability concepts, so I ended up not reviewing it, but I did read it. It's also really great. It would go into No Notes. Crest is going into No Notes because of how it handled disability in a very nuanced way, which I really liked. It was great. That's all I have to say about that, really. Next is Bridgerton. Bridgerton is going into Buttered Noodles because they created a bunch of disabled characters for season 3 to each get collectively like 30 to 45 seconds of total screen time over the course of the entire season. And it was clear that they did that like in a way to like get brownie points for having made disabled characters. And I was like, you can't just, first of all, make them principal character. The Lady Danbury, I believe is her name. She is an actually disabled person, and she's playing an actually disabled character, which is great and important and wonderful. But if we could have more principal disabled characters, particularly from this era when visible disability was probably more common, it just felt a little weird that they were just like, oh, we're just gonna have this for like one scene and like have this for one scene. It felt a little more like they wanted brownie points for having done it rather than actually wanting to work with disability more fluidly in a show that totally could have worked in very easily. So I just wasn't super impressed by that. So that's why it's middle of the road. Next we have Argylle. This is going straight into borderline hate crime. This movie, if you told me it was written by AI, I would believe you. And I think that's all that I'm going to say about that. Actually, that's so false. I watched it with a bunch of friends and we were actually losing it. We didn't know what was happening the entire film. We were so confused and we gave up before the last 20 minutes. I had to watch the last 20 minutes by myself. So that was a great time. It had such potential to be such an interesting film, and then it squandered its potential. It was just really sad because the whole time you were like, oh, this could have been better. And the plot twist negated the previous plot twists continuously. So then I was just like, nothing is real. Great. Next is Ken Bear's Ski. That is going into No Notes Kids Edition. I've never seen a book that really was about, you know, a character realizing that they're struggling with something. Like, I didn't realize I needed to get glasses until my 3rd grade teacher was like, Sydney, you're squinting at the board. You should ask your parents about it. And I went to get glasses. And I think it's cool to have that kind of story in a children's book. I think that's important. Also in the realm of kids, next we have McKenna Shoots for the Stars. Again, No Notes Kids Edition. It's a little outdated. It's a little like, oh no, Josie's stuck in her wheelchair. But not too much. And I think it's completely reasonable for the era in which it came out. Yeah, I think overall it was handled pretty well. It's not the strongest of the American Girl movies, I'll be real with you on that. But I think they did a pretty good job. That was definitely one of the first times I ever saw a wheelchair using character in a piece of media in my life. So that was very important and crucial for me as a thing that existed. Next we have Fairest, which is the like book 3.5 in the Lunar Chronicles series. This one is unfortunately going into well. I would put it lower if the rest of the series did not exist. I think the rest of the series handles disability super well. And Fairest did not, which I was not impressed by, but I was like, well, I'll give her a little bit of leeway. I don't think the disability choice that was made for that book was necessary because it's not in the original fairy tale, and I don't think she handled it super well. I get why she did it, but I disagree with that choice from a disability media analysis perspective. Next we have Superstore, which is going into well. I think this character, the wheelchair using character, was well written, but they were like, oh, we tried so hard to find a disabled actor and we simply couldn't, so we cast this guy. And I don't think that's super fair, because if they wanted to work with a disabled person, they could have, they should have. Each character in this show is a different archetype, so they could have put a disabled person as one of the other archetypes. Like, there were ways to include disabled people in the show that they chose not to. So even the characters written super well, I'm not super impressed, particularly given when the show came out. I'm not super impressed by the casting decision and then the justification of that casting decision. The actor who played him did a great job, but I just don't think that that should have been a situation that happened. Final 10! Huzzah! Next we have Agent Carter. Agent Carter is going into No Notes. I really enjoyed this show a lot. I thought it was really great. I mean, obviously it would have been nice to have an actually disabled person play this disabled character, but the show was really great, so I'm gonna give them a free pass. I'm not gonna give them a free pass. I'll give them a little bit of a pass. Next we have Happy Feet. Happy Feet's going into No Notes Kids Edition. That being said, the disability in Happy Feet is handled perfectly. The gender roles in Happy Feet are vastly upsetting to watch as a grown-up. So, you know, there is that give and take, do with that what you will. Overall, I think that Happy Feet had a really great idea, and then it sort of lost the plot by the 3rd act of the film. And that's okay. It doesn't need to have the plot solid. It like had a message and then did have a message, because it was like humans are bad, but then it anthropomorphized the penguins so much that they were effectively humans, and then it was confusing. And then there was the gender roles, again, very upsetting. And the penguins, with the way that the women penguins moved was just unsettling. So, you know, it's fine. Next we have Winter, which is the 4th and final book in the Lunar Chronicles series, also going into No Notes. I think the way that they handled her madness was really stunning and really lovely, and again, that was a situation where that specific disability was not necessarily in the original text, that it's like the fairy tale that it's based on, but it decided to include it anyway, and it did a fantastic job of it, which I was very impressed by, particularly because stories around madness usually age the worst, because those politics are changing very quickly, very rapidly right now. So I had low expectations and was very impressed by how they handled it. So overall, what's her name? Marissa Meyer, she did a fantastic job of the series. I just think that Fairest was maybe not the best of decisions. I would highly recommend the series. You should read it. It's a really good time. There's just a lot of it. You'll go through it really quickly. It's just like a commitment, you know? Next we have Daredevil. Daredevil is going into buttered noodles. I think it's fine. It's just very much the super crip trope. I was like, this is super predictable. I'm not super impressed by this. I think we can do better now. Could we do better at the time? No. So I'm sure for the time it was great representation, but for now I'm like, no, I'm not here for that. Basically all I have to say about that. Next we have Todd Browning's Freaks. That is going into Go Now. This movie is super historically important and comes up in disability media conversations all the time. It's also pretty short, and it's pretty cool to see a more disability affirming film from the 1920s, 1930s. I think it came out 1932. Let me cross-check that. Stand by. 1932, I was right. Look at me go. Yeah, I think it's really cool to see a disability affirming film from that era, A, and B, I think it's really cool that there is so much visual record in this film of what freak show culture looked like, and of freak show performers, because they hired real genuine freak show performers to be a part of this movie. And for me as a historian, that just brings me joy to see that. So it's an important film. It's a shockingly well-made film for its era. It's nuanced and complicated, and there's a lot of disagreement as to whether it is actually positive or negative representation. But for me, I feel like it holds a lot of nuance in the way that I enjoy for my media around disability today. So I think it's super cool, and it's free online, so you should watch it sometime if you have like an hour to spare. Again, it's really short. Next we have Warriors of Virtue, going into Known as Kids Edition. For the 90s, impressive handling of disability. The movie itself is not very good, which my friend might yell at me for saying, but he also told me it's a bad movie, and then we watched it together anyway. It's not a well-made movie, but the disability is handled really well, and the messaging of we'll cure you if you come to the dark side, and him saying, no, I like being different. Super cool, super progressive for the 90s. It's a fun, bad movie. So if you need a bad movie to watch, I would recommend this. Next we have White Bird. This is going into buttered noodles, or is it going into Unwell? I'm so conflicted. We're gonna put it into buttered noodles because I will be so real with you. The film is beautiful. The soundtrack is amazing. The acting is off the charts. And the script is good, but narratively questionable, because it's using disabled narratives and a Holocaust narrative in order to teach you that kindness is important in a way that feels sort of like it's taking advantage of both minority groups, particularly because Wonder very much did that, even more deliberately and obviously with Disability, that I'm even more skeptical of another thing that is the sequel to Wonder by the same author. So I enjoyed watching it, but it did feel afterwards like I ate too many gummy bears or something. Like it just felt a little too sweet. It felt a little off. And I was like, I enjoyed it, but something is wrong. And then the more that I thought about it, the more like offended I felt. So I think that's how I feel about that one. So I'm really torn between that one and being in Unwell or Better Noodles, but I'm putting something else into Unwell, so I guess I'll leave it. Next we have Goldie and Bear, going into Known as Kids Edition. I wish that the mom were in the show more, because she's super cool and she uses a wheelchair and she's a business lady and we love to see it. But other than that, it's fantastically done. I really enjoyed it. Also because the parents in that show look like a trans man married to a lesbian in the best possible way. Like that's just the vibes that they give. And I was like, I'm so here for that. Next we have X-Men, second to last. Huzzah, we're almost done. X-Men's going into Unwell. It's super crip trope a lot. The representation is like fine, but it's also just not a good movie in my opinion. I didn't like it. I thought it was kind of haphazard and all over the place. So it's not going any higher than that. And then last but not least, we have The King's Speech, and The King's Speech is going straight into Go Now because, oh my gosh, if you're the kind of person who wants your parents or your grandparents to understand some semblance of disability culture and of learning to work with your disabilities instead of fighting against them, this is the movie that you should show them, because it frames it in a way where he comes in being like, oh, I'm, you know, want to fix my physical issue, and he learns that it's actually a body-mind problem, and he learns how to manage it and how to accept it as a part of himself over the course of this film. That's so well made and so beautifully written. And also there was something so important to me about seeing a historical figure who was disabled recontextualized as disabled and have that seen as a very neutral thing. And seeing him doing his speech exercises and seeing him learning and unlearning internalized ableism and just like going through the process meant a lot to me. I don't know. I just thought it was really cool. And again, it's a beautifully made film and I really enjoyed it. So I'm glad that I got the chance to watch that. And that, friends, is our tier list for the day. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that, let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my decisions. But these are the choices that I have for this very moment in my life. Let me know what you think about all of these, and thanks for watching my review series. I'm glad that you like it. If you have any review requests, you can drop them in the Google form that I have linked at the top of the description for you. And that's all. I will see you, my dear, in the next one.